Well, it's about time I got back into this. Hello world, we're looking at Unforeseen Incidents, a game that has taught me that I don't know how to spell the word unforeseen. It comes from Backwoods Entertainment. Wait, nope, they have a Comic Sans option. Review over 0 out of 10 would not bang. Sorry, professional. This game comes from Backwoods Entertainment and Application Systems Heidelberg, officially the most awkward company name I've had to pronounce on this show. The game itself starts quietly enough. A local radio show talks about the fever currently spreading in the sleepy hamlet of Yelltown. A sleepy hamlet that looks like a cross between Megaton from Fallout 3 and the remake of Beneath a Steel Sky I want to play one day, and also live in. Our protagonist Harper is woken by the local mad scientist with, and this is getting a bit real for me, tech support issues. There's a laptop working on a cure for the aforementioned fever, processing data, and it won't charge. Harper heads over, fixes a wire, and buggers off. But as Harper is heading home, he encounters a young woman. She's showing clear symptoms of the famous fever, but for some reason she doesn't want to go anywhere near the local treatment centre. Instead, she tasks Harper with delivering an envelope before being carted off by the local treatment people anyway. So we've got a mystery to start us off. Now, not that I would normally reveal much more than that, but the developers have requested that no footage past Chapter 1 get used. Which means I don't have anything to show for the triangulating a radio signal puzzle failing to properly convey that I could turn a UI control to solve the damn thing, but hey. That's a bit of a shame, I think, because the first chapter is almost exclusively set in Yelltown. And since that has about 11 distinct screens to visit, I'll apologise now if the footage gets a bit boring as a result, but I have chosen to abide by their guidelines. Doesn't say you can't talk about anything past chapter 1 though, so I can tell you that the rest of the chapters start out with a hacking/pipes puzzle in a particularly pointless case of flash forwarding. Not a bad puzzle, it's just weirdly placed. To actually play the game, you've got something very close to a 2-button interface. Left click to do, right click to examine. Except right click will act like you'd expect left click to act in a surprisingly high number of cases. It's not a big deal for a game with no branching paths and no game overs. One timed sequence later on toes the line, it has infinite retries though. But I'd argue the benefit of keeping right click strictly to examination. I like the idea of having an action which benefits the player and will always be safe to do without committing you down a certain path. Having right click act as left click on occasion adds a level of uncertainty which I don't think is needed. But they did implement double click to warp through exits though, that makes me happy. You've also got pop out inventory, a snappy inoffensive version of a feature I'm less fond of than others, which is marred by making you drag items to use them. I'd be harsher on the game if I could figure out a better way to implement item use on mobile, which I suspect may be the reason behind this design decision, except Broken Age patched in the option to let you pick between drag and click to select, so maybe I should be that harsh. Going back to my nitpick on right click acting like left click, this manifests itself in a weird way by having you left click once on an inventory item to get a description of it. That's just odd. It's almost as if left and right click don't do anything different, except they do. Sometimes, anyway. And to help you fill out that inventory, you can bring up a hotspot indicator with the spacebar, which disappears after a time delay for some reason, even if you hold the key down. This is not the first time I've seen this and I still don't understand it. Whilst I'm on interactive objects, I'm not sure about having the object name always appear at the bottom of the screen. I've talked about this before, although it doesn't come up that often. Making your eyes dart about the screen is surely more work than the players need to do. Up to where the cursor is, down to where the description is, it's odd. At least more work compared to having the name up near the cursor. That said, this is one of my complaints that I stopped noticing entirely before I'd even spent a full hour with the game, so grain of salt. Now you know how you'll be solving the puzzles, you'll probably want to know about the puzzles themselves, and I'm happy to report that this game makes you think. The standard get item, use item elsewhere malarkey is downplayed quite a bit in the name of variety. One that pops up a couple of times is the process type of puzzle, which will give you a set of instructions to follow. How to properly light a campfire with only components from the forest, for example. How much of a positive you think that is will depend on whether you see it as a I get to feel like I'm doing something type of puzzle, or a I have to keep switching back to these goddamn step-by-step instructions puzzle. Personally, I always started on the former, but once or twice I ended up in the latter. Other tricks in the toolbox include picking the right function from your pop-out list of multi-tool functions, carrying the same potential positive and negative as the previous example. And my personal favourite, trying to decipher which of several choices is correct so you can pass a dialogue check. Which variant of component A will work with object B, that kind of thing. With a little back and forth you can brute force the early instances, but later ones will force you to exercise the old brain matter to at least narrow down the possibilities. I liked that in Resonance, I like it here. here, and if you see point-and-click games as a thinking person's genre, then perhaps you'll like it too. There's not many surprises when it comes to dialogue, as often there isn't in this genre. You select a line, protagonist says a line, standard stuff. At which point the game chooses to jump from your default full-screen view into close-ups and back again. It's quite jarring to see at first, particularly so since it's clearly the full-screen graphics zoomed in, but again, something you get used to without much thought or effort, although it's more flattering to some characters than others. Speaking of dialogue, wait, is that a pun? I have to give a special mention to your scientist buddy for being one of the few Scottish accents in games that I find convincing. Worth bearing in mind I've gotten this wrong before. If you hadn't seen it, I doubted the accent of a character in the Charnel House trilogy, who turned out to both be actually Scottish and using his natural accent. Egg applied directly to face. He's from Edinburgh though, me being from Glasgow maybe I couldn't recognise the accent. Different cities, it's a whole thing. Also, I'm noticing an odd trend of games I'm reviewing that have Twin Peaks references. Maybe they were in production about the time that the revival was airing and development took another 6 months, that might be it. Anyway, aside from cases of moderate to severe derp, I'd hesitate to call Harper your average everyman bumbling point and click protagonist. He's a handyman of some repute to the point that he has that multi-tool on him at all times. The individual functions of which you get to pick from. It's more that he quips a lot. You might be astounded to realise that a plot focused around a disease outbreak doesn't turn out to be a kitten shitting rainbows, and to his credit, Harper does not quip during those dramatic moments. He's got a perfectly believable range to him. Until the next scene where he's back to quipping again. Unforeseen Incidents is not a big offender in this regard, there's many an 80s action star that exhibits this flaw. I just noticed it while playing is all. Outside of those dramatic moments, the game is pretty light-hearted. Not a full-on comedy bent, you won't be laughing your trousers down, but light. It really helps that the voice cast nailed their scenes pretty well, whatever tone is called for, accompanied by a subtle but fitting and pleasant soundtrack. Something else I noticed while playing was what looked like a side focus on player choice. Not in a Telltale Games Fanny Buzz Mackenzie will remember that kind of way, not that extensive. I'll give an example. Near the beginning I mentioned the infected woman being carted away for treatment despite wanting literally anything else to happen. Harper suggests calling these guys in, the woman says no. If you decide to respect her wishes and you try to leave, a nosy neighbour makes the call instead. Now arguably that's taking choice away from the player, railroading them down a certain path, but if that was the beginning and end of the developer's thought process, they wouldn't have bothered letting you walk away to begin with. What I think this allows you to do is play the character the way you want. There's no in-game consequence for this, other than knowing that you did what you thought was right. And it still veers heavily in the direction of but thou must in cases, but it's certainly a step up from a cutscene made me do it, and something you'll get to take away from your playthrough. A nice touch that certain RPGs have been able to make work for decades, and I'm happy to see it cross-pollinating this genre too. In a less extreme example, the game also takes one of my favourite aspects of Dave the Tentacle, presenting you with multiple puzzles to work on at once. Here it manifests itself more as multiple facets of the same puzzle to work on at once, but the net result is the same. Stuck at one bit, work on another for a while. Except maybe that one case where one task seems a hell of a lot more urgent than the other, but you still have to do the side... yeah, it's weird. What I think we have here is a game which is quite good. Good voice cast, interesting puzzles, great visual look, but one that started to drag a little towards the end, at least for me. I've seen it take 5 hours to finish by someone who knew what they were doing, and it took me a few more than that. Maybe a few more than a few more now that I think about it. When we're looking at indie point-and-click titles, a price tag of roughly £16 might seem on the higher end of things, but you get high production values and quite a lot to sink your teeth into. The plot would have to grab you for it to be something you truly love, but nonetheless there is plenty to love here.
I don't remember you being such a big football fan.
I am. I dig the Sea Dogs.
The Seagulls, more.
Exactly. Go Gulls! Woo!
You don't know a thing about football, do you?